Right. Good evening, everyone. We're just going to give about a 5-minute window to allow attendees to join, and then we can start tonight's events. Just 2 more minutes, I think, and then we can kick off. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. Tonight we've got Hellen Hornby from Groundwork Northeast in Cumbria, who will be talking to us about the Tyne Estuary Partnership. I've worked with Hellen before, and it's quite an exciting project. I hope you take something away tonight. This webinar is part of the Women in STEM series. Essentially, it's a partnership between a number of organizations in the Northeast, including the ICE, but also the Royal Society of Chemistry, brought us all together. And we're kind of promoting the work women in the industry are doing, but also promoting the exciting work that's being done in the region. So many thanks to the Women's Engineering Society for taking the lead on this. The series so far has been really exciting. I hope you find tonight just as exciting. My name is Meshi Taka. I'm a chartered civil engineer. a member of the Institution of Civil Engineers, and also the Fairness, Inclusion and Respect lead for the North East. I'm also technical manager at Fairhurst in Newcastle, and I lead the water services and infrastructure team there. We are also a partner on this project, so it's quite a good coincidence, I guess, that it's also on the table tonight. But we found that a lot of influence and the opportunity to do good work has been presented by this partnership. So hopefully, like I said, you come away from tonight with some really good ideas and feel energized to become involved. Now, just a bit of housekeeping. We have a live chat box, so feel free to submit your questions as and when. I will endeavor to present those questions at the end of the presentation, but what we'll also do is we'll table some questions as we go, just to break up the evening a little bit. Our anticipated end time is between 8:30 and 8:45. I don't want to keep you here too long, but hopefully, I think, like you said, we want the audience to be involved. So feel free to kind of put your 2 pence in. We're looking forward to some exciting conversation tonight. So yeah, your input is very welcome. Now, just moving forward, like I said, Hellen Hornby has kindly accepted to take up the challenge. She's very passionate about this project, so I can't wait for her to tell us more about it. For those of you who've not heard about the Tyne Estuary Partnership, it is a strategic and influential partnership invested in the long-term environmental and economic enhancement of the estuary. As you know, the River Tyne is an important wildlife corridor, one of the best Atlantic salmon rivers in England. So it is a resource that we need to take care of. The partnership has a shared vision to protect the water environment. It's focused on ecological and biodiversity enhancements, and it's all about influencing change. They're creative, they're ambitious, and they're pushing the boundaries going forward. Now, as we know, there are a number of legislative as well as environmental and sustainable global challenges that we all face in the coming decades. So this is one of those projects that's looking to step up to the podium, really, with regards to tackling some of these challenges. Now, there have been a number of lessons learned from other areas, and like I said, it's focused on nature-based solutions. So Helen will be taking us through all those opportunities and some other projects on the horizon. So without further ado, I'd like to take a moment to welcome our speaker, Hellen Hornby. Hi, Helen.
Hi.
Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Messi. It's great to be here on a cold and wintry November night, but hopefully we'll have some exciting ideas and some inspiration for people to get involved. My background is basically anything but an engineer. I've kind of come along a traditional route, if you like, into the environment sector, going to university and obtaining my first degree, volunteering work to get my first paid employment, you know, as a kind of amassing other skills on the way, such as a formal teaching qualification. So basically, I've been an educator, I've been a volunteer manager, I've been a site operative, fundraiser, and now more latterly kind of trying to influence other strategic organisations to kind of improve our areas. That involves kind of community engagement work and involves kind of being a project manager as well. So there's a huge suite of skills that are required to kind of deliver a partnership like this, none of which are strictly engineering. But the project itself does use an awful lot of engineering expertise, and it's my kind of role to try and influence those organisations who have the expertise amongst them, to kind of look more widely around and see how we might involve businesses and developers and local authorities in kind of maximising the benefits in the Tyne Estuary. So these kind of nature-based engineering solutions is what I really want to talk to you about tonight, and that's kind of where the Tyne Estuary Partnership comes in. So our vision is simple. It's to develop a healthy and vibrant River Tyne, and that can obviously mean not just, you know, the kind of the river itself and its ecology and its wildlife and its environment, but also for the businesses and the people who live in the area as well. So we have kind of a three-pronged approach in which we're kind of looking at developing the partnership itself. So this is an influential partnership of organisations based in and around the Tyne Estuary have an interest in the river itself and the wider kind of strategic outcomes around the quality of the river, but also those who have an economic kind of interest in it. So we have organisations such as the Water Framework and Northumbrian Water who are involved, and the Environment Agency, the statutory bodies such as Historic England and Natural England are also involved, and the 5 local authority areas. We're looking at the whole of the tidal Tyne, so from Tyne Mouth up to Wylam. So we have 5 local authority areas that we cover, and the main kind of output, if you like, is to provide these estuary enhancements. So we're looking at kind of biological improvements, biodiversity improvements that meet the Water Framework Directive, to try and improve the area. So we're looking at softening the estuary edges, to prevent siltation, to prevent pollution entering the water, and in the long run to improve water quality. But as I said, it's not just about kind of those outputs, it's about kind of how this might link into the communities and how we might be able to provide natural capital gains for the area, how people might benefit from their health improvements, from education opportunities, and the cultural aspect of the Tyne, and why we are needing to do these interventions because of the history and the heritage of the Tyne. So the partnership itself was started officially in 2018. It's an Environment Agency-led project, and they contracted Groundwork North Eastern Cumbria to develop a feasibility study to assess the whole of the tidal Tyne. So in 2019, this study was carried out by the University of Hull, and it identified over 70 potential sites where we might install some kind of feature that would improve the estuary edges. From that, we delivered a report that identified 8 priority sites, and it's those priority sites that we have been taking in the last year to a sort of detailed design stage. Our landscape team have been kind of developing the technical work on that, kind of working with other contractors and engineers in designing the actual interventions, getting the survey and then the baseline evidence together. Obviously, there's an awful lot of work around kind of consents and land ownership and licensing and planning permissions that all needs to be in place before you can install anything like this on the river. We're also looking as well at the long-term kind of maintenance and monitoring requirements, because one of the issues around these projects where they've been done potentially in other places is that there hasn't been a lot of monitoring that started at sort of zero, if you like, at the very beginning. So it's very hard to kind of demonstrate the impact of these interventions if you haven't got that baseline data. So a small amount of Environment Agency funding has been used as a partnership grant, and that has been bolstered with other revenue that we've been able to bring in through grants and local authority match funding, and a lot of in-kind support from the organisations on the partnership as well. The longer term aim is to fund it initially through a large National Lottery Heritage Fund application. Obviously, this has been delayed slightly because of COVID-19 outbreak, but we are hoping to submit an application next year, which would see a lot more of these interventions being delivered on the Tyne. But we do have other funds in the meantime, from the likes of Northumbrian Water, from South Tyneside Council, and some of the private sector organisations that are enabling us to deliver on site this year. The partnership now stands at nearly 100 organisations, and as I've mentioned before, most of the kind of important key players are on board. So we've got 5 local authorities, we've got the Port of Tyne, Northumbrian Water, the University of Newcastle, so we've got lots of the research institutions that are involved as well. We've got businesses and developers, so it's the Smiths Dock and Holborn Dock are kind of interested in potentially installing features on their sites. So there's a sort of list, and if you're interested in kind of becoming a member, then obviously we always welcome new organisations and new faces to our membership. We've got around 300 people who are on our regular mailing list, which we send out kind of information about the events and things too. But if you would like to sign our pledge, then that will mean that, well, we'll be able to kind of acknowledge your support through the website that we have. But it's a simple kind of indication to funders and to other organisations on the interest and the support for the partnership and its aim. So it's a non-binding kind of pledge. It doesn't kind of require anybody to commit any financial support to the partnership, but it does really strengthen our applications when we're looking to funding to say that the organisations that are based in the area that have an interest in waterways, in rivers, in estuaries, in kind of biodiversity and the wider sort of impacts, you know, have a vested interest in the Tyne and are supportive of our aims and objectives. Ultimately, sorry, the kind of aim of the partnership is to become sort of self-funding. The Tyne Estuary Partnership has drawn a lead from the Thames Estuary Partnership on that, in that they have secured funding up until a certain point, and then they've become self-sustaining by organisations contributing indirectly to the running of the organisation. So ideally, that might be something that we look at in the long term. So in terms of the Tyne itself, some of you may be very familiar with it, some of you may not be, but obviously, and the same with most of our kind of larger rivers, it's been very heavily modified by our human impact. So the historic industry on the Tyne was phenomenal, and as a result of that, we've lost the vast majority of our kind of natural habitat that would have been there on the banks. If you've ever taken a river trip up and down the Tyne, you'll see an awful lot of the banks are kind of built up, either wharves or piled embankments. So there's no kind of space for new habitat and environment to kind of develop in these areas. Kind of mining upstream and kind of some of the sort of activities further upstream have resulted in kind of a lot of leaching of organic and inorganic sediments kind of coming into the river, which has affected the water quality. So this, together with the loss of habitat, has meant that, yeah, there's a significant kind of impact on the Tyne Estuary itself. As a result, it's been classed as moderate and not improving by the Environment Agency through the Water Framework Directive. And there is a policy to try and get all rivers in good condition by 2027. And on top of that, obviously, we're facing kind of unprecedented change in terms of climate change and the climate emergency, and potentially an extinction of an awful lot of species that we might find on our coasts and our estuaries. And these are obviously all being addressed by some key statutory framework that's coming out. But at the minute, that coupled with the kind of development that we have means that it's a really good time to introduce sort of nature-based solutions to the river. So we use the term NBS, which I know can be confused with the construction sector, but in our case, we refer to nature-based solutions, and I've got a short little video here in case you're not too familiar with the term. Okay, sorry about that. Did that kind of, I'm not sure if that stopped kind of halfway through. It was me looking to see if there was any questions coming in. Messi, I'll kind of leave that up to you if there's anything particularly relevant now that you think people might want to have answered.
I think one of the comments that have come through is a bit of curiosity of how some of the examples you've shown, nature-based solutions can be kind of integrated into kind of traditional infrastructure developments. So for example, if you have a new fancy residential complex on the riverfront, for example, because we know a lot of that's happening in the Tyne at the moment, how some of these nature-based solutions can be used to benefit obviously the River Tyne, but also add value to the complex that is bringing obviously development to the quayside or to the riverbank.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly been something that's been found out from the Thames Estuary Partnership, in that I think there was a significant uplift in the value of property and the land value in the areas where they had put in these nature-based solutions before. So there is that kind of economic kind of output as well for developers, as well as obviously making a nice environment for your residents, as well as providing that improvement from a water quality point of view, or biodiversity point of view, or a carbon capture point of view. Hopefully, as we get through the presentation, we kind of see some more of the examples of what you can do. But yeah, there's a wide range of opportunities out there, and I'll get to that in just a second. Okay.
Another one that's come through is regards, I think on your video, there's a bit about combating climate change. So I don't know if you want to expand on a little bit on that, just to kind of give the audience an appreciation of how some of the benefits of this project can help with some of those challenges.
Do you want me to do that now, or can I come to that kind of a little bit later in the presentation?
Oh, we're ruining the surprise. All right, then. We'll
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, lovely. Okay, so in terms of kind of the engineering, some of the opportunities that we can provide through the Tyne Estuary Partnership are looking at kind of retrofitting features to existing structures, and these engineering options, if you like, are often largely based on ecological kind of form. So it might be that they're, you know, that you're out in a particular environment and you can look at the kind of habitat that you have around you, and you try and closely match that as best you can using engineering skills. So we're using ecology and the environment to kind of inform the engineering practice and the design. You might better fit to kind of the banks of the Tyne where you've got old historic docks and concrete walls. Obviously things weren't done quite so nicely in the sort of 60s and 70s and way beyond that. And there's an awful lot of fairly simple features that you can add that will provide the habitat and the environment for biodiversity to thrive, really. Sometimes it's about creating new habitat and using 3D technology to kind of mimic that. So it might be something that's installed on site, but all of these options have got to be engineered to stand fairly significant environmental conditions. Obviously on the Tyne, we've got huge tides, you get an awful lot of kind of flood water rushing down the river at times, I'm sure we're all aware of. So anything that's kind of added into the river or onto the banks, it needs to be able to withstand these unusual conditions.
Helen, we have one here for you before we move forward, and it is, I was wondering if the 8 sites that have been taken to the detailed design have a rough program for the work yet, subject to funding, of course, but are there any current plans you can share?
Yeah, and again, I'm going to come to this. So we have 2 sites that we're looking at delivering this year. So we're looking at a site in Hebburn in South Tyneside, where we're looking at installing bushwood fascines to create more mudflat and salt marsh. And then in North Tyneside, we're hoping that we're going to be able to deliver on a site at Royal Quays Marina. And there we're looking at a floating vegetated platform, so a floating ecosystem, and potentially also a reed bed being built, installed and planting into the rock arm, so the riprap that's around the marina, that's kind of very, yeah, aesthetically pleasing, shall we say. But yeah, all the other kind of 6 sites that are included that were the detailed design stage 4 certainly have the potential to be delivered within the next couple of years. It's just limited by funding. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So I just wanted to bring up this website, which is a Dutch website, and they have, I was going to just use it as my presentation because it's excellent, but they kind of sort of sum up nature-based solutions in a perfect way, really, in that we've taken what was our natural sort of water environment and sort of taken everything that we've ever needed from it, and most of that time we've never really considered sort of what our impact would be, and it's only recently that we've started to consider the impact and that this might have. So our kind of wetland areas were very resilient areas and areas that would have a huge benefit in terms of kind of the enabling the communities around them to be resilient. But obviously with our development we've kind of lost sight of this, and you know, there's nothing particularly natural about an awful lot of our big cities that are next to rivers these days. And this progress has come at a price. And climate change is obviously driving the impacts of what we've done in our estuaries and on our rivers, and how we've canalised and built around them and removed kind of the sort of natural hinterland that would have been an area where a lot of the kind of flood water and that could have gone. So there are a wide range of projects across the globe now who are looking at kind of bringing back this sort of environment, and trying to encourage you know, the local authorities and the developers to think outside the box when it comes to redeveloping their areas, and the ideal solution is building with nature at the heart of it. So they call it building with nature here in Holland, but obviously our nature-based solutions are the same sort of thing. And they have here the very similar sort of ideas to what we have. So they're looking at kind of hanging structures that might provide habitat for fish. You've got floating structures that provide habitat above water, sorry. You've got groins on the edge that prevent further erosion and flooding, and provide new habitat and allow salt marsh to colonise. And obviously in Holland they have a much greater problem with land levels and what we do here. So you know, they're kind of working around not just building in huge flood defences, but alternative means of kind of preventing the storm surges and the like, and creating these natural embankments that might do that kind of job. Tidal parks, again, not something that we really considered as kind of a sort of larger scale project, but something, you know, you could take all of these in separately, or like here in Rotterdam, you can build them all in together and potentially look at the whole of the area, which obviously would be a great benefit to an area, to Newcastle and Gateshead and North and South Tyneside. So that's that. Okay, so here in the Tyne, we're looking at kind of a number of different opportunities, a number of different interventions. So living sea walls is a concept that I've come across from Sydney, from Australia, and they have other similar designs. Art Ecology, who are based down on the south coast, and it's basically bolting on to existing structures, small micro habitats that would allow either water to be retained with them when the tide goes out, so that you've got a little refuge there where invertebrates might hide out, and then birds might come along and feed. So it's very important for some of the kind of wader species, some of the important wildfowl that you get on the river, things like purple sandpiper might be seen to use these crevices and creeks that would form on these living sea walls. Habitat creation is a very obvious one. This image there, top right, is something like what we are hoping to achieve down in Hellen. So you build these kind of groins across the edge of the estuary using natural materials, so brushwood, fascines, and then that slows the flow of the water down, allowing the sediment to settle out, and then that builds up your level of your riverbank. Now in Hellen there's a very rocky substrate from when the area was a small dock, which is preventing the colonisation of more salt marsh. So if we can get the mud to creep over the rocky sediment, then hopefully the salt marsh will extend out further and we'll have a bigger area there. Submerged refuges are very important, especially in the channel. There used to be an awful lot of islands in the Tyne, which would have created shallow areas and areas where fish could seek shelter, and there's obviously very little of that now. And these refuges are places that are often kind of included underneath the floating pontoons, and it's incredible kind of what fish and what other marine invertebrates that, and algae that colonise underneath these. It's a great new habitat and something that you might never have kind of considered before. You could look at species-specific introductions, so things like the Wild Oyster Project, which is a Zoological Society for London project, is looking at places where we might be able to have oyster beds on the Tyne and on the Weir. Mussel ropes is a very simple solution and excellent for existing docks and pontoons, and it's simply kind of laying strands around these structures which would be colonised by mussels and other invertebrates, and these are really important because they're really good filters. Both those and oysters filter out pollution and sediment from the water and can lead to improved water quality. Managed realignment is a much more sort of significant project where you would take down an existing flood defence or wall and then realign the bank behind to protect any assets, any buildings or homes, and then you would allow the area in front to sort of naturalise. They've done this on the Tees in a number of places. They've done it on the Humber. There's one up in Scotland as well. So they're big, significant sort of multi-million-pound projects, but they can have a real positive impact in an area. Other simple things like bird roosting platforms. You've seen these probably in different places. They've got a couple at Royal Keys Marina already. And with the kitty wakes, obviously, on the Tyne, there's opportunities to sort of help and improve that population as well. And otter halts, very simple. Otters have returned to all of our UK rivers now, which is a really positive thing. But they don't necessarily still have the sort of habitat in sort of the main rivers. Especially where it's very built up, very sort of urban. And so, if there are opportunities to kind of install otter halts on the Tyne, we'd be interested in working with organisations to facilitate that. So this is the Sydney project, and again, it's something that is a very simple idea. It's something that's very cost effective. Let me just get started.
Today, over 50% of the foreshore of Sydney Harbour is armoured by seawalls. The net cost of these has been loss of important coastal habitats such as mangroves, seagrass, oyster reefs, sandy beaches, and the biodiversity that they support. The Living Seawalls initiative is bringing back this biodiversity by adding complex habitats to seawalls that support this marine life.
We want to be able to have a positive impact on the marine environment. So we have a bunch of projects that are aimed at exactly that. How can we stop and even enhance the degradation of particularly our coastal environments? It's amazing that we're able to use this kind of mixture of technology and infrastructure. It's been an absolute honour working with Sims over the last couple of years. I really see the work that they are doing and this work with Volvo as well is really developing a blueprint for how we can build a more sustainable and more biodiverse future.
The idea of the design of the tiles is that we actually mimic some of the features we find in natural rocky shores, what we call microhabitats, that provide food and shelter, and they create this balance of the ecosystem.
It's been really amazing how in just a year, a relatively short period of time, this pretty bare, featureless seawall has become this thriving, living seawall. They're already home to a ton of different marine species. Species like oysters, seaweed, mussels, barnacles, snails, and chitin. We rely on the harbour for so many reasons. So maintaining a beautiful, biodiverse harbour is really critical to our way of life here in Sydney. We have several installations now in Sydney Harbour. We know these designs work and we know what sorts of benefits we can expect from them. Right now, I just feel like we know a lot, we have a lot of research, and we can move on to really using some of that research to build solutions.
would be great to see the whole community, everyone getting together on this journey of bringing seawalls to life.
So Helen, we have another question for you. How is the risk that floating or marginal features do not become mobilized during a flood such that they create a risk? Are they designed to withstand a particular size of event, for example?
No, I don't think they're specifically designed to sort of manage a 1 in 200 year flood, for instance. But the engineering of these structures that we're looking at is being carried out by Biomatrix, who have delivered these kind of floating platforms and pontoons globally for a number of years. So they're well tested. They have just installed one in the docks in Liverpool, so it's the first kind of tidal one there. But they haven't actually been used in an estuary before. So this, you know, in the main channel in an estuary. So this is very much a trial, and what we probably will do is really over-engineer it initially, just to obviously make sure that, and we are being sort of cautious in terms of where we would site them in the main channel. Obviously the port of Tyne, you know, they wouldn't let us install anything that wasn't fit for purpose, and we do have to go through the whole marine management license, and we have to go through planning consent. So all of those kind of considerations will be sort of built into that. As for kind of sort of some of the more fixed structures, so things like the bushwood fascines, the idea is that they will kind of become, because they are natural materials, and once the sediment accretes over the top of them, that they will become part of the natural foreshore. And what's happened on the Tees is that the Tees Rivers Trust there has delivered a similar project, and they have a short-term kind of agreement with the church commissioners, I believe it is, who own the riverbed, and that they have adopted that stretch of the riverbed for a short period, and should everything be okay, they then will return the rights to that section of the riverbed to the church commissioners, and that will just become part of a natural foreshore. So that's kind of how we're looking at managing sort of the sort of permanent fixed features. But yes, it is a trial, and if there are issues, we are retaining kind of, you know, the budget to be able to remove these features if there is any sort of serious or for instance the landowner isn't interested anymore. But hopefully that's something that won't happen.
Thank you.
Okay. So as I said, I mean, a lot of these nature-based solutions are becoming, you know, sort of more and more prominent these days as we look to alternative ways of managing flood risk and increasing biodiversity and meeting our kind of net gain targets. There were some very locally that you could quite easily go and see. So at Killingworth Lakes in North Tyne side, Northumbrian Water Group have had a floating pontoon put in there. River Tees have been working on the Immerse project, and there's bushwood fascines that have gone in there. The Tyne Estuary Partnership, excellent website, and an awful lot of information about kind of how and how they've installed various interventions on the Thames. It's really, really good. A larger project in Scotland, Malmö, Sweden is an excellent example where they've taken a very run-down port area, and instead of just, you know, looking at it sort of bit by bit and doing small development here and small development there, they've kind of assessed what they wanted for the whole area and built kind of biodiversity and nature-based solutions throughout the whole of the city and the port and the river environment as well. So yeah, there's an awful lot of kind of opportunities out there, and Catubia is one of the ones where they've done some successfully done some oyster beds, but that's to kind of prevent coastal erosion. Obviously the ones that we're looking at doing on the Tyne, looking at, you know, hoping to address any coastal erosion. It's more about kind of the water quality and trialing the reintroduction of what was a sort of native species. So the Liverpool is a project, and we're hoping to have Dr. Staples speaking at our Tyne Estuary Partnership event on the 8th of December. And I've highlighted this one because it's the closest kind of project to the sort of concepts that we're looking at for Royal Keys Marina in North Tyneside. So this is a float. I'll start it and then. So this is the same company that we're looking at using on the Tyne Estuary and the River Estuary as well, because we are looking at other estuaries and improving them through nature-based solutions. So these planting systems can be basically made to fit, their modular, so they can be kind of almost any design and any shape and any size. They're doing some pretty significant ones in London, and they've started introducing all of these new features to them. So you have elements of that are submerged, that go underneath the water for the fish refuge, as well as the obvious habitat on top. And then it's planted up with native UK species. And again, Dr. Staples, who oversaw this project for the for Liverpool City Council, said that yeah, they really kind of went to town with the engineering and to make sure that it was safely secured and split in place. And Galen, the CEO of Biomatrix, said he probably wouldn't need to do that next time, even though it was installed on a dock which was tidal. But it would be amazing if we can see these. And in Chicago, they've got a mile of these on the river that goes up from Chicago. So we are a little bit behind in terms of kind of our adoption of these sort of features. So as I said before, I'm not an engineer. I don't tend to get involved too much in terms of kind of the technical spec. My role is a sort of partnership development. But we do use and work alongside engineers in almost every aspect. So we use engineers in surveying, whether it's kind of river modelling, whether it's kind of engineering surveys of structures, of quay walls, those kind of aspects. We work alongside our partner organisations, especially the Environment Agency, who have the engineers within the flood and coastal risk management team, and obviously working along other organisations such as Fairhurst, and then the suppliers of the actual nature-based solutions themselves, trying to kind of ensure that the structure meets the needs of the landowner, of the community, of the environment, and yeah, what the ultimate benefit of it will be. So current projects, we have these trial sites in development at present. So we're looking at a couple in Gateshead, around where the Metro Centre is, and Dunstan Staves. We've got both sides of Newcastle of the quayside, so Newcastle and Gateshead. Howden Wetlands, so you know, the area in and around Northumbrian Water's treatment works. Royal Keys Marina, which is a privately owned marina, North Tyneside, and then we have 3 riverside sites in Hebburn in South Tyneside. The reason we have 3 for South Tyneside is largely because the local authority there was very supportive. They were very proactive in kind of working alongside us, and we were able to kind of secure some funding specifically for the South Tyneside area. So that's why we've been so able to kind of fully cost out and work on 3 sites down there. And as I said, we hope to kind of deliver on one of the Hellen sites this year. The idea being that obviously some of these sites, you know, might be privately owned, some of these are in public ownership. So we would hopefully be able to work with the landowners to draw down revenue, whether it's part of their own, you know, resource, and kind of will help them meet their net zero or their biodiversity net gain targets that might come as a result of planning licenses and laws. But yeah, I mean, the schemes can be from, you know, sort of a few £100 if you're looking at some small scale 30 pools to obviously multi-million-pound projects if you're looking at managed realignments. But all of them will benefit the estuary, and if we can deliver a number of these all the way along the Tyne, then the aim is to have this kind of string of pearls, you know, almost, if you like, whereby we have habitat and environment that will benefit our wildlife, and it will improve, it will create a wildlife corridor, which then has a knock-on added effect on the water quality and providing, you know, a sort of a really nice environment for our local residents as well. The carbon sequestration and the climate change will kind of come as a result of increased area of salt marsh and mudflat as well. So we call it kind of blue carbon, which is any carbon that's stored in marine systems, and salt marshes are apparently one of the most efficient habitats for storing carbon within their soils. So you can see there it kind of can fix anything up to 5 tonnes per hectare. So the Hellen site that we're looking at is only fairly small, so it's about 200 metres. So it's 200 metres by about 20 metres, so about 400 metres squared. So obviously, you know, at the minute we're not looking at kind of huge projects here, but there's still potential to sort of really meet some of the kind of targets around net zero when it comes to kind of carbon emissions for local authorities wanting to meet the climate emergency. And also we're kind of underpinned by a lot of other sort of strategic frameworks and legislation. So I've mentioned the Water Framework Directive, the new 25-year environment plan is obviously very delayed, but it's due still to come out, and there's going to be net gain targets within that, so developers will have to offset and improve on the biodiversity that was on their site. It doesn't necessarily have to be on site, so we would potentially say to any developers out there that you might be able to use one of the interventions that we've got in the reserve, if you like, to kind of offset any environmental impact that you might have on site. I'm not saying it would do it completely, but it's an opportunity that's there. All the local kind of biodiversity strategies as well. You know, the habitats that we're looking at, the salt marsh, the seagrass, the mudflats, some of the protected species, the otters, purple sandpiper, are all kind of listed in the local biodiversity action plans. So you'll be meeting those targets as well. There's the Environment Agency kind of flood risk management plans and river basin management plans, which are currently under review, but the next policy will come out and that will take us up to 2027. So they're looking at linking those two things together, and obviously we can kind of contribute into those and help sort of meet some of those objectives. And then you've kind of got local sort of planning policies and infrastructure plans as well that we can kind of help to meet if you're local authorities. And then last but not least, there's kind of the sort of even bigger picture, if you like, in terms of the kind of global impact and this is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So the project itself can meet so many, and Meshi knows a bit more about this than I do, but you know, there's everything from clean water and sanitation to industry innovation and infrastructure, there's life below water, there's climate action. And so, you know, by developing and installing these interventions on the Tyne, we will be meeting an awful lot of those sustainable development goals. And that's it. This is a little slide I just like to finish with. It's a mock-up that was done by anyone of Newcastle Quayside, and kind of what the vision they saw for Newcastle Quayside. So it's a nice mix of kind of recreational use of the river, as well as kind of floating pontoons and habitat and environmental structure. And again, there could be hidden benefits underneath the water as well that we're not seeing. Okay, that's it, that's me.
Thanks, Helen. That was brilliant. We have, I think it's more of a comment, but I'll read it to you. It says, living seawall tiles seem a great opportunity for community engagement. For example, school class sponsor a group of tiles, perhaps design their own center tile and surround by 6 standard tiles. So is that something that you guys have looked into in regards to working with schools or education establishments to kind of use it as part of an interaction outreach program?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I saw those tiles, I just, you know, it had an art project written all over it for me personally. So yeah, I mean, there's just something about them that's really, you know, really attracts the attention. And I'm sure, yeah, schools or corporations might be interested in kind of sponsoring them. And, you know, if we could kind of do a huge dock area indoors, I mean, it would be so much more attractive than kind of, you know, sheet piling. So yeah, definitely something that we'd be looking to explore. And, you know, we have kind of limited resource at the minute, but we have kind of done some small amount of kind of community engagement with the likes of the Sea Cadets in Hebburn, and they're interested in getting involved and potentially looking at kind of doing some of the monitoring as well on the site that's adjacent to their land. So yeah, we're definitely kind of interested in developing educational and kind of volunteering, I guess, aspects of the partnership.
What are some of the roadblocks? What are some of the challenges? Obviously, we know about the benefits. We know that it's a real tool in regards to meeting some of the sustainable development goals globally. But we also know that there's the natural resistance to change. So what are some of the roadblocks you're having to overcome to kind of make this more mainstream?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, obviously, you know, we, like I said, we would have preferred to have put in a significant lottery application, which would have funded a number of, you know, we were talking over £5 million to fund quite a number of these interventions along the time. And because of COVID-19, and sort of all of the heritage lottery funds have been sort of postponed for the duration. And when they come back, you know, the focus of them might be slightly different to what it was before. So obviously funding is always an issue, and it, you know, it would be really nice to kind of look at the bigger picture and do it as a coordinated approach. But what we're finding, you know, is that we're looking at, you know, well, if we've got, you know, 100,000, then we can kind of facilitate and implement that particular project on that site. So yeah, funding is always an issue. But I mean, I think one of the kind of factors that I've come across is trying to kind of open those levels of communication with developers, not just obviously, you know, because everybody has a bottom line, and sometimes it's, you know, it's very tight, but just finding out at the right, you know, when is the right time to speak to people and to get them to consider, you know, these opportunities. Is it before planning goes in? Is it as soon as you kind of get wind of what's going on? And a lot of kind of the contacts that we've come across have been like, oh, it's too soon, and then the next thing you find the planning's kind of gone in, and you think, well, have we missed the boat? So yeah, I found that quite challenging myself in terms of kind of, yeah, sort of, yeah, kind of opening up those avenues of communication at the key critical moments.
I know you've talked about you not being traditionally from an engineering background, but I think there's no doubt the work you're doing is influencing the sector, both construction and infrastructure. I guess what I'd like to know, because we keep talking about diversity of skills that support the engineering sectors, irrespective of the discipline, is how do you find navigating that gap really? So you're feeding your kind of essential resource and a skill in a predominantly technically driven, standards driven, I mean, we've talked about flood risk, it was level of service, that's the language, day-to-day language. So how do you feel, or how do you deal with some of those barriers in communication? So you're selling something of value, which I guess cannot really be measured in traditional engineering terms. So how do you deal with that? How do you kind of get around some of those challenges there?
Yeah, well, I must say that obviously I haven't the technical expertise, but you know, our landscape team are definitely more kind of informed on that front than I am. So they do lead on all of the kind of design and development work of the actual interventions themselves, and so they're much more kind of used to any terminology and kind of those aspects of the project. But it has been, there's no doubt, it has been a steep learning curve for all of us, and everything from kind of, you know, figuring out sort of when the MMO license was, you know, sort of due to go in and topographical surveys done, and unfortunately, kind of I have more of the sort of the environmental background, so I can kind of bring sort of information and expertise around sort of the ecology and the wildlife to the team, which kind of runs nicely alongside kind of the technical side of the landscape architects. So yes, I mean, you know, we have kind of used a wide range of consultants to kind of give us that information and provide us with that kind of level of expertise, so that we're kind of sure we're working in the right direction. And obviously, you know, we have the Environment Agency, and although we're working within a particular team, you know, that they do obviously have roots into the other areas, so we can kind of draw on departmental kind of support from other key areas within the EA.
So I've got another one here. I think this is around the diversity of skills and the kind of specialist skills you draw on. So I know you mentioned biology before. So the question is, do you work with chemists on this kind of project, either for analytical purposes or for engineering solutions?
I would imagine, I mean, we sometimes have to have surveys of the sediment done for contaminants. So I would imagine that would probably be requiring, you know, sort of chemical analysis of the components within the sediments. I can't think of any other kind of sort of applied use of sort of chemistry within the Tyne Estuary Partnership. Our landscape team might be able to, Michelle or Matt might be able to kind of say a little bit more. I don't know. Yeah, that's the only kind of application I can think of right now.
Okay. We have another one. It says, with biodiversity, clean water, etc., I'd imagine success isn't linear in this project. How do you know the trial is successful, or whether to change and try a different nature-based solution within a project?
So we have kind of identified the sort of the monitoring requirements as a baseline. So obviously, when we put in these interventions, we'll be going out and we might be kind of looking at the invertebrates in the sediment, or we might be looking at kind of the contaminants, or we might be looking at the turbidity of the water, the plant species on land, the birds that are naturally found, you know, sort of bird populations and the like. So we have a whole suite of metrics that we're looking at measuring for the different sites, and obviously we will go out and we will monitor throughout the sort of the initial 5-year period to kind of establish whether any of these things have improved. But yeah, we were asked recently by an organisation if we were to install this pontoon in this location, could we demonstrate that it would have an impact on a specific volume of water within the Tyne Estuary? And you know, we honestly couldn't say that. You know, it's kind of, some of them, when you're talking about kind of oyster beds, they will filter a specific volume of water a day. So you can say that, you know, that level of water will be purified, well, not purified, but improved. And that can have a knock-on effect within a specific area around the Tyne. But, you know, the kind of evidence base around the use of nature-based solutions is something that's lacking. But I did have a really interesting conversation with Professor Pip Moore at the University of Newcastle, and she is working on a monitoring project around nature-based solutions, and has been doing interventions with these sea walls in Wales previously. So hoping to work alongside her and the university to be able to carry out some of the monitoring that's required to kind of demonstrate the impact that we're having.
Right, we've got another one here. It says it's building up on the kind of legislative and industry requirements. I can see developers incorporating such projects into a scheme because they have to, in order to meet concern requirements, the stick. But are there any financial benefits, i.e. the carrot?
Well, as I said, the Tyne Estuary Partnership, when they installed some of their nature-based solutions, they did see a significant uplift in the prices of property and the land values in the areas where they had delivered these interventions. So there's definitely that carrot as well. You would kind of hope that, yeah, some of the developers and the organisations would be thinking of the bigger picture, and we've had conversations with Igloo and Urban Splash, you know, and they are interested in doing this because, you know, they have, yeah, you know, they have the bigger picture on their agenda, and it's not just necessarily about kind of, yeah, what's the most viable option for them. So yeah, we kind of have to hope as well a little bit that, you know, it does make sense for these organisations and these corporations to be delivering these kind of interventions on their site, not just because it's a statutory requirement. Does that help?
That's brilliant, thank you. I guess this is the bit where we're just going to kind of dig in a little bit into the legislation. So you've mentioned the Water Framework Directive. You've also mentioned, obviously, the Sustainable Development Goals. As we're all aware, we're in a little bit of a transitional period at the moment. So it'll be useful to have a bit of, I guess, conversation around what the ongoing transition re-Brexit, if that has any effect or will impact some of the plans we have with regards to nature-based solutions or some of the objectives that are on the horizon and with regards to environmental and sustainable objectives.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have been assured by our contacts at the EA that because of a lot of the environmental legislation is enshrined in UK law, that it's not just related to like the European Water Framework Directive. So a lot of the basis, you know, about water quality and the monitoring of it to ensure that it's adequate and improving will remain kind of post-Brexit. I mean, I guess, you know, there will be opportunities for things to change, and the kind of new agricultural bill is probably one of those as well, in that there'll be opportunities around that to kind of look at nature-based solutions and kind of the probably more in the upper catchments, you know, and looking at kind of using habitats for flood storage and it having a subsidy basically for that. So a landowner would benefit from having a site that was able to provide flood protection for so many homes and would receive kind of payment, you know, for that. So that might be an opportunity kind of going forward as well, which we've not had in the past.
What about a national partnership? I mean, you've talked about the Thames doing some work, Liverpool doing some work. Obviously, we're building on the Tyne Estuary Partnership at the moment. But what about something on a national level that could potentially unify some of the kind of projects and perhaps be more effective with funding and securing funding for more large-scale improvements? Is that something that has been assessed or investigated?
I don't honestly know. I mean, there are a number of sort of other organisations out there that kind of focus on nature-based solutions and offer kind of examples of good practice and the like. But I'm not kind of aware of one that's specifically kind of looking at, I don't know whether it's aquatic and estuarine. But yeah, it's definitely something that, yeah, we could look into. I'm not 100% sure on that one, I'm afraid.
I think I was gonna invite Lisa, Michelle, and Matt to join in on that. If any would like to add to what Helen has just said with regards to kind of national partnerships and how we can expand the reach of nature-based solutions. Who would like to pick that? Matt, should I just put him on the spot? How about that?
Hi. Oh, there's Matt. Hi, Matt.
There we are. Surprise.
The interventions that we're looking at on the Tyne, as Helen was saying, they're similar in approach to what's happened on the Thames. There's similar things happening on the Humber and the Tees. We're involved in projects on the Weir, the Esk and the Blythe. So there's certainly a national movement of estuary works going on, and I think it is beginning to sort of feed. One project is beginning to feed in and help the others. So I think hopefully going forward we could get some more of this. And actually, we've talked to the Thames Partnership and discussed whether there couldn't be a central point where we can share the experiences that we have and all kind of learn from that.
Thank you, Matt. We have another one here. While you're all on, stay tuned, don't go anywhere. So some great ideas really worth pursuing. I appreciate that funding is an issue. I'd be concerned over maintenance and not just capital funding for wood, natural materials and structures. Are you looking to put a portion of money aside for funding maintenance? For example, apprenticeships for future, wardens, craft people, for how quickly some of these structures can become unsafe. I think the reference is being made to the amphitheatre at Bede's World. So I guess the main issue is the long-term maintenance. So we get the funding, we put it in, but what about the lifetime of what we're putting in? How do we manage that? What plans have we put into place to help do that?
I mean, the way that we're working with it at the minute is that the Tyne Estuary Partnership and the funding that we have will install and maintain the structures for 5 years, and that will include kind of regular sort of maintenance, site-based maintenance of the structures and the monitoring aspect of it as well. But after those 5 years, it's expected that the landowner would adopt the structure themselves, and if not, then it will be removed. So, for instance, the floating platform that is hopefully going to go in at Royal Quays Marina will be removed if the owners there didn't see the value of it after 5 years. But we're hoping that these things are going to be an excellent success, and that, you know, obviously the public and the boaters and the users are going to really appreciate kind of what's the improvements that are seen as well. So it would be worth, you know, the kind of landowners' time and money to kind of keep these things up and running. But as I said, some of the smaller things where we're installing kind of bushwood fascines, we're hoping, you know, that the idea is that those will become part of the naturalised riverbank, so there wouldn't be any kind of long-term maintenance of those aspects. There was a little bit in there as well, wasn't there, about kind of apprenticeships and stuff. We have got
skills.
Yeah, we're looking. We were waiting for the outcome of a green recovery fund, whereby we're looking at 5 estuaries in the northeast coast and employing teams of estuary rangers with a supervisor to help install and maintain and improve key sites around these estuaries. So it wouldn't just be the Tyne, it would be others as well. And if that's successful, then obviously, yeah, that will be a really valuable asset for the area, and hopefully they would be able to get involved in more than just the specific site that has been included in the lottery bid.
Well, that's brilliant. Right, well, I think thank you all for joining us. Many thanks to the audience. I think before we run along, I just wanted to say a big thanks to Hellen for making the time and for pulling all this information together. And for the backup crew as well, you guys have been amazing, very useful, providing all the kind of technical information that we needed for tonight. I also want to take a minute to just talk about the next event in the series, Batteries for Energy Storage. So it'll be Professor Serena Kaur. That would be from the University of Sheffield. So that's the next event planned for the 3rd of December. So again, it's another free event. So if you're interested, please follow the directions, register, and the rest as you know how it works. But to everyone else, thank you for making the time to join us tonight. We're very grateful, and I hope you've had a good evening, and if anything, learned something new tonight. So thank you for that. I think that's it, really. It's time for us to say good night and have a good evening.
Thanks, Beshi.
Thank you. Bye.